So, so I have coffee time here, so it's morning for you. So my mother tongue is German and I learned English for a while, but sometimes I use the wrong word because there are similar words. So if it is like this, please ask me if I use wrong words or so. I'm working in the museum now for more than 20 years, and I have experience in Europe that there's not an exchange of knowledge between museums and collections like in America, or I know from Spinach. So we started to have a collection talk series, first in-house in our museum. So it is each month, together with a colleague of mine, also a collection manager, and we give an insight into stories behind the collection. So everything that you have in your head about the collection, but it's not written down. It's about maybe jars, packaging, science, abbreviation, liquids, everything that you know from your daily work, but it's not shared. And we would like to give this information to all the people who are interested in our museum. But maybe first I should start how big is the audience in our museum. So the Museum of Natural History in Berlin had at the moment around about 500 employees. So we have 125 onboardings per year, and around about 100 people leave our museum every year. So we have PhD students, volunteers, but also we have interns. So during the Corona period, we started with our in-house talk series that maybe when the people are at home also have the feeling that the museum is existing and that they have a guidance through the collections and know what's happened in the collections. So at the moment, I have 40 to 70 listeners per month in my talks. I think that that's a great audience. And I also have external guests for the 2 years now from 20 museums in Europe, but maybe it will be more in the future, hopefully. And I will talk a little bit about the themes. So I started with jars, proper sealing, testing fluids, but also collection handbooks, movements. Movements are, we have it every year. So maybe you know it from your museum or your collection. So we are a huge museum. We have 30 million objects and there's always a reconstruction and a movement. Also, we have these things like digitization, identifiers, database, also the wiki. Maybe you know the Spinach wiki. We have also 2 in-house wikis about collectors and collection management. But there are also a lot of stories behind the scenes. Maybe you know something about why there is this photograph on the wall or why there is this book there. So, and it should be also an open collection. So an insight in the collection for everybody who's working in the museum, because we are not only scientists, we also have these humanities of nature. We have our facility management, and they sometimes don't understand why you do your things like this and not in another way. So to explain everybody on why we would like to use this jar or why we would like to have this room like this way, I would like to give this insight in the collection. A short view in my museum, my collection. So some of the words are in German because it is a German presentation. So I also talk in German normally. And my first talk was one about jars. I also give this talk in Paris at a conference, and we have these different kind of jars. Sometimes you see, when you see a jar, is it a good jar or not, and why. So also this explaining of your personal experience should be very important to other people, because when they start the job, they never know this, and you cannot read it anywhere. So you should explain to the younger people or to the volunteers how to deal with them, why we have this, and maybe they have an idea, because when you work more than 20 years with the same thing, you have these so-called, no, I missed a word. So you have your own view on this, but you cannot see what's right or left. And maybe if a new person comes, it can tell you, also they can tell you, yeah, maybe you can try it this way or this way. So I started also to explain the history of our database timeline, so that you know there's a lot of things going on. So we had a lot of databases in the last 20 years in our museum, and some of them work, some of them, maybe you know it from the wiki. Sometimes it's hard to get the information into the wiki. Sometimes it's hard to have the wiki online, and sometimes it's very hard to find people to fill it with information. So it's the same like with all the databases. And so I try to explain all the new people in our museum why we have so many databases through the time, why we use them, why they have different names, why they have these abbreviations. So all the information's behind them. Because when you now started in our museum, you don't understand why we have 20 different databases. But I also like to share informations like this. We have a collection handbook in Switzerland. But the most people in Germany don't know this because it's in Switzerland. Switzerland is not far away. They also talk in a German language, Schweizerdeutsch, but there's no exchange of this. When you are in a special group, maybe in a spinach group or so, maybe you heard it. But when you're outside of this group and you never heard it before, then you don't know that there's a collection handbook, and it's a good collection handbook. And maybe when it's in the same language we talk, like German, or maybe in Poland, Polish, then maybe you can use it too. Because it's not necessary to develop the same thing in a new way. Maybe you can implement the handbook also for your country. So there is also now a nice exchange between Switzerland and Germany. And before, we don't have it like this. But there's also the history of collection rooms during the reconstruction time. So that is my collection. So I'm working with spiders and scorpions and mites and ticks. It's a very small collection. There are more important collections like the dinosaurs. So, but the people coming to our museum maybe see the new version of our museum. So on the photographs, you see the very old rooms. There was a ruin from the Second World War. It exists since 2007, and then it was reconstructed. But now the rooms are new. We have new storage rooms, but you should maybe know what's before, what was before, maybe what was in the room before, where it was going, how many jars maybe were transported during the movements. And sometimes I make a quiz. I show the old room and ask all my new colleagues, do you know where it is now? Maybe you can find the room. So when you see it here, this room is now this. So it's completely different. It's not possible to know that there was before a huge collection room and now there are a lot of smaller offices. But the quiz is very nice to ask the colleagues to find the room. And I don't know if you know it in America, but there's a huge number of natural history and medical history collections in Germany. So we have at every university a smaller collection, and we have these huge natural history museums like Munich, Hamburg, Berlin, and Bonn. But there's a lot of more smaller collections, and to bring them together, it's my goal, to tell them all the stories that we know. And then before I started to look around what's in Germany, I also have no idea how many collections will be in Europe in total. There's no number that you can find how many different collections we have in Europe. So maybe you know it for America, I don't know, but for Europe, I have no total number. For Germany, I have no total numbers, but that's all. But maybe it's interesting how many collections will be there. So last year, maybe you know, there was a Corona time. After it came the war in the Ukraine. And then it was the first time that I recognized that there are also collections, and maybe we should talk with them, and maybe we can have a helping assistant to the war situation. So my collection talk should also be for these colleagues, maybe to share now information, to share where they can find help, where they can find material. We need this networking now in Europe. We don't have anything like this, like spinach or something like this. So, and yeah, my in-house wiki. I also have an in-house wiki about collectors and expeditions. And to talk about collectors and expedition, it's very important for me because I'm a collection people. And I have more than 800 different collectors in my collection. But most of the names I cannot find in the World Wide Web. Because if you have a normal German name like Müller, maybe you heard this before, we have so typical names like Meyer, Müller, and Schneider, you couldn't find them. But to ask the people in the world, maybe you heard or you have people like this in your collection, maybe also a collector with a name and you know something. We have also this in-house wiki. And we have this Bionomia website where you can find also now our collectors. So last Monday I had a talk and I had guests from 12 different museums in Germany to implement this wiki and maybe to develop a new version that we can open for the community, because at the moment it's in-house in our museum, but I like to open it maybe first in Germany, next step in Europe, and maybe one day for the whole world. Much. It's my Christmas presentation. On Christmas, I try to use stories around the collection. Maybe you also know this packaging, unpacking, and marveling. It's a short journey about the history of industry, of natural history museums, and the people working in the museum. So if you have these packages, you can also tell the story around the package. So there's maybe one package from cigars, maybe from medicine, from a different time. So you can also tell the stories around these packages and why we use it. I don't know how is it in your collection. Maybe you have very new packaging, very new jars or not. But in our museum, we have often these very old ones. And you also have the story behind this packaging. And I would talk to the people what they should know about it. Maybe if you have a special ones from the 1920s, like this you see here in the picture, or from the 1950s, so you also maybe have an idea from when the material is, when it will be collected, because they use these old packages. And I try to figure out the stories behind the firms to tell them maybe it's a firm from Germany, or maybe it's a firm from Great Britain, or wherever. And my idea is, or my idea behind this is maybe to share knowledge, but maybe you have ideas for me. Maybe there are other people have the same idea like me, have these collection talks, or give an insight in their collection. And I would like to share my ideas with them, or maybe you share your ideas with me, maybe to teach our volunteers, to teach our scientists or our PhD students how to handle with all this information, how to handle with all these things that you can find in a collection, maybe how to handle with the jars. I'm in the baby feeds at the moment, so it's my second year of giving this talk series. I'm very happy that I have 40 to 70 listeners, but maybe we should open it. And I have no real idea how I can do it, how I can reach all the collections or all the people in the other countries like Poland or maybe in East Europe. So there are a lot of collections, but maybe you have an idea for me how I can do it. And the second problem that is English. So and German, it's my language. I can talk in English, I can talk in German, but in the East European countries, English is not the language they know. Maybe Russia, so they can talk in Russian, but I can talk in Russian. I can only say my name is Anja in Russian. So maybe you have ideas how to handle with the different languages or with the time zone. So I'm open for any idea. I'm open for any question, and thanks that you listen to me. And maybe I can open my talk series one day for a greater audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. That was really fascinating. Does anybody have any questions? You can put them here. I'm going to actually change it so you can unmute yourselves. And also you can put any questions, or as you saw, she posted some questions for us in the chat. Does anybody have experience reaching across political, geographical lines and connecting with collections and language barriers and things like that?
Yeah, we also have the problem with Russia. In Russia are huge collections, very interesting collections, but it's now not allowed to work with them together. Not sending emails, not sending letters, materials, no expeditions, nothing. It's yeah, it's hard for the scientists and for the museums. And there's such a great knowledge, but it's, yeah, you cannot reach it at the moment. And maybe for you, it's far away from me. It's 6 hours away. So to the next border where the war is. And yeah, I have no idea. It's the same like with Iran, Iraq, Syria. So, but I know there are people working in collections doing their best, and we try to help them or to share knowledge, but it's very hard to get in contact. And I don't know if you have any contacts to it, maybe personal, but maybe you have an idea how we can reach them, maybe sending something or get in contact with them too. Nobody. It's very.
Megan King suggests something like index herbariorum. Would you mind unmuting or saying more about that idea? I think it's kind of like thinking about adopting what they've done, possibly. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So during quite a few years ago, I was a intern there, and when they were actually sending out surveys and collecting information from different herbaria around the world. And it was a really good platform because they sent out, they really strive to get as many people as they could to respond to them. You're always going to have people who kind of just like, oh, I don't know what this is, and I'm not filling it out. But they did significantly increase the number of collections that they had listed in an index herbariorum within a few years. But it gives detailed information about the collections, so the type of specimens that they have in their herbarium. It gives contact information for collections managers and directors, as well as like physical locations, mailing addresses. And I think it's something that I would like to see for all collections across the world. But that's a big challenge. But yeah, it was great, and it was run by the former president, Barbara Tears. So, but I'll share the link in the chat as well to Index Herbariorum.
Thank you, Megan. I think something similar exists on iDigBio and GBIF, but maybe it's not as comprehensive as what you were saying, and it's whatever the institution decides essentially to upload. So slightly different.
iDigBio has a US collections list, but once again, that's not helpful for Anja's problem, but except for as a model. I can share that link too.
I know iDigBio. I know Deborah Paul very well from the spinach meeting. So I know these platforms, but I know it. But the people maybe in East Europe or also in Germany, in the smaller collection, never heard before from this. If you are not in a community that tells you that there is something like spinach, it was the same for me. I'm at my first spinach meeting was in Cardiff in Wales. Before I never heard something about spinach. I got an invitation from people from the Netherlands. They told me, there's a good meeting, please come with us, visit but before, no. It was nothing that we know. So it's not easy, because when we have this problem in one of the huge museums, it's how many problems must be somebody who's in a very small collection in a small village, has not this community behind, do not know the people. And yeah, I know there are more than 500 different collections in Germany, and maybe I know colleagues from 20 or so.
You just gave me an idea, Anja. I wonder if some resources have like a way, or programs have a way to like, they have like some sort of lecture series where you can like request that someone come speak to a group. I know the Scientific Ocean Discovery Program has this, and they essentially like fund the people to go, but even like in a virtual setting, like if there was a way to that like GBIF or iDigBio or the Herbario list like actively was trying to reach the spaces that might not know about them through maybe like larger institutions like yours or mine that might, I don't know whose job that would be, but it's an idea of note.
Yeah. Last Monday, I had the management or people from the management of 12 different museums in my talk series. It was super cool because I'm a collection manager, and the management or the director of such a museum listen to me, but I tell them about how to create a wiki. So it's, yeah, it's, but I don't know how I can explain, but I like to share with more people this information or give this talk series a bigger background also, that I can reach more of the smaller collections. And it takes a lot of time to find out how I can ask, or which are interesting themes, what I can explain, what I can tell about maybe jazz or not. So we have not this huge background like spinach. So now I have spinach, but before everything was in my head, and it was my idea, and I try to do it with the power I have. So
Army also shared some thoughts about using like digital platforms. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate.
Yeah, I can jump in really quickly. I mean, these days there are many free ways for kind of collaboration and team sharing across kind of time and space. I know it's a little bit of personal preference, so you can, I guess, sort that out once you have a working group together, but things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, I'm sure there are some other free open source, but those have been powerful ways for people to stay connected. I always like to plug Geo Latinas, which is a geology group, which is kind of aligned a little bit with museum collections, but the way that they communicate, I mean, they have members internationally, and they all just stay organized on a Slack platform, and they have everything in 3 different languages, so English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So it may be worth kind of reaching across disciplines too, and seeing what colleagues in other fields have found successful in collaborating internationally. That's a lot of times what I do. If I can't find it in my specific area, I'll say, hey, what are people down the hall or down the building? And in Spinach, we all come from a variety of different backgrounds. So I think we have a lot to offer in terms of thinking about like ways to organize digitally and keep ourselves arranged digitally that way. Thanks.
do you know if there's anyone gives similar talk series at a museum or so? Or is it not, yeah, how can I say not normal, but
Like
in
within,
Germany, I
also,
don't know any other museum give talk series like this about collection themes. I know talk series from scientists, I know talk series about special themes like digitization also, but not about the daily things you have to deal in a collection.
I'll hop in. I know at the Florida Museum, they've, like, as you said, Anya, there's definitely been lots of talks about digitization and research and scientists. But they, you know, in the past, at least the museum did like portals into the museum where they like have a collection like featured, and then there'd be like specimens, and then, you know, a talk that was kind of more collection management driven. And also there was regularly collection management type talks for the docents, because they have a, you know, large volunteer docent group. But I don't know if it was like as broad as your talks were. But oh, and I see Adania has her hand raised. Hop in.
I do also some TikToks and Instagram and so That's the thing I also do, not only for the museum, also for the people outside, our visitors. So I started also during the Corona period with this, to give these insights behind the collection, because it was not possible to visit our collection in the last 2 years or 3 years, because it was a lockdown. And so I started with these behind the scenes things and do smaller TikToks for children and also for very young children with the age of 3 or 4. And I was also in a cinema movie. There were one movie about Berlin, it's called 24 Hours, and for 20 minutes an interesting person had the chance to tell about their job or about their life, and I was one of the chosen person. So I had 20 minutes in a cinema in a 24 hours long film. So you need a lot of power and a lot of popcorn to watch the movie, but it was very interesting. So it was also a great project from a university. But I like this idea of like a newsletter from the collection to give these insights every month. So not the formal themes, the official themes like digitization and so on, also the other things behind this that you know.
Yeah, and Anja, thanks for sharing. I was just going to add that I put it in the chat already, but I felt like at the broadening participation session, people did give like general talks about their collections in terms of what they're doing, and doing the Spin It survey from this year's conference, they had sessions about having workshops like this. So maybe reaching out and having a workshop in the future, because it seems like they've had it in the past, might be a way to collect and collaborate even further, because it was in that like broader representation education session, and then maybe they could make it a broader thing, so it's a continuous thing happening. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but thanks for sharing and good luck with getting things done, and thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to talk. I always say I can only talk and drink coffee, so that's my goal. Okay. If you have any question, maybe you send me an email or in the chat later on. And thank you that you listened to me.